not only was this a tale of two series, I mean, the first two games looked like it was going to be a sweep. The next two, you're like, okay, they've got it. This game was nuts. I thought Denver came out with a perfect tempo. It was offensive more than defensive. And then the T-Wolves just shut them down. Jamal Murray played well. Jokic did what he did, but Porter and Gordon didn't give you anything, really. Gordon, nothing offensively. I mean, I'm sitting watching it. The Western Conference is so good. Like, I feel bad. If you lived in the East, watch Eastern Conference basketball, and you couldn't watch the West, you could only watch East. That would be like, oh, you'd buy whatever package it cost you to buy the superior basketball. I guess my takeaway is a really good basketball team in Minnesota beat another really good basketball team. And in the end, at the beginning and end of the series, defense prevailed. That's kind of my take.
Yeah, this whole series had two different faces to it, and either side had the other team dominating. Like, and whenever Minnesota was locked in defensively, it felt like Denver couldn't score. It felt like they were just underneath this oppressive wave of size. And then you have game 3, 4, and 5, where Denver puts up a 127 offensive rating, which is off the charts. Boston had the best offense in the league this year, and I think they were at like 122. So to give you an idea, Denver had this unbelievable offensive stretch in the middle of the series. And honestly, I thought they had a really good stretch in this game in particular. This game actually felt like a little microcosm of the entire series in the sense that Denver out-executed them for the first 2.5 quarters, and then Minnesota really locked in and they just couldn't score. Anthony Edwards just did his interview live with the TNT guys. And he just mentioned something. I was surprised at how forthright he was about it. He's like, yeah, I can do other things than score. I can guard the other team's best guard, and I can lock up Jamal Murray. I felt like that's what I did in the second half. And he's right. Like, and I cannot remember a time where a guy had a more disastrous first half and then just found a way to turn it around and be impactful. Like, the numbers won't show it, but him drawing double teams consistently was a huge asset to the Minnesota offense. He generated a ton of rim pressure in that second half by just saying, screw it, I'm putting my head down and I'm going to the rim. He made a lot of really smart kick-out passes to shooters, and he's right. He put Jamal Murray in jail, and that served a real issue for Denver's offense. And that's another layer of this that, like, Denver was up 20 at home in the second half with a chance to go to the Western Conference Finals. So I don't want to act like they need to make some sort of dramatic change. But if you were to point to a specific issue, this is a team that generates rim pressure through overwhelming size, and Minnesota negated that. And as soon as they negated that, it revealed this other issue, which is their perimeter players can't beat people off the dribble. And so all of a sudden, they couldn't get the defense in rotation and get some of the higher quality Nuggets shots that we're accustomed to seeing. Meanwhile, for Minnesota, it's like Naz Reid is slashing, Karl-Anthony Towns is slashing, Anthony Edwards is slashing. It was an athletic mismatch, and they were able to take advantage of that tonight. Yeah,
we saw that in the first two games of the series. I also think we just have to give Chris Finch a lot of credit. This is a not only smartly constructed team, it's a really well-coached team. For him to get Ant could score 40 a night in most nights. When you get great players to buy into a team concept, I mean, they were going to go bare in the second half. Naz Reid doesn't do much for 3 quarters. Then it's sensational late. Everybody takes their turn. It's a patient team. And I think a lot of that is Finch. A lot of it's Mike Conley. You've got guys that have been around the league. All these, it's a great combination of size, athleticism, coaching, construct, dynamic young star, older veteran IQ player. Not to say Ant's not a bright kid, very self-aware. I said this earlier in the series, the construct of both teams is sensational. I mean, usually you can look at a team like you can look at Indiana and go, they have some defensive holes. They need better wing defenders. Or you can look at the Knicks and go, they need another pure score. Even Boston, sometimes I'm like, God, when Porzingis is out, it's like they need threes. They need something beyond that. Boy, I look at Minnesota and I'm like, as I've always been kind of hot and cold on Karl-Anthony Towns, but he hit some big baskets in this game. He hit big baskets in the series. We talk about this in the NFL and we don't talk about it in the NBA a lot. A lot of times in the NFL, we'll just go, wow, that team's smartly constructed. Minnesota's front office, their coaching, they have everything. The hustlers, the wings, the dynamic star, the size. the IQ distributor. Conley's like a quarterback. It's like they're unselfish, but can then go heavy into Ant. It's really well done. They're like a smartly constructed pro football team. I don't see the holes really.
Yeah, one of the biggest issues that had me off of the Minnesota Timberwolves all year was their offense.
Yeah,
and they were a bad offense all season. Like the Cavs were a better offense than them. The Pelicans were a better offense than them. The Warriors had just had Steph Curry were a better offense than them. Like they were a bad offense all season, and it was a lot of inconsistency. And honestly, what kind of turned this series around after Denver had taken complete control over it. Denver had complete control after Game 5. They weren't even competitive in those middle 3 games. Like Minnesota got killed in all 3 of those games. And what was so impressive was Karl-Anthony Towns, guy who's kind of known as being an inconsistent offensive player, showed up in a big way here in Game 7. Yes. Jaden McDaniels, a guy who's known as being a bad offensive player, showed up in a big way in Game 7 tonight. Yeah. Hit multiple massive corner threes, little push shots in the lane. Obviously, he's this incredible defensive player. The story for Minnesota is their defense is unbelievably good, but their offense can come and go. And right. When Karl-Anthony Towns is playing well, when Jaden McDaniels is playing well, you can't beat them because their defense is so oppressively good.
Yeah, and that's why they wouldn't win. When you have a team that you have kind of an inconsistent offensive player, you're not going to win March Madness. But you can win an NBA championship because Karl can stink for 3 games. Yeah. And by the way, Minnesota defensively is consistent. Offensively, they're not. But they can, like this game, they just sort of hung around and Ant wasn't delivering much. And then here comes Gobert and then Naz Reid and then Ant adds defense and Karl-Anthony Towns. When you have a 7-game series, it allows you to figure stuff out. It allows horrible games, terrible halves. And also in a 7-game series, and I think Malone and Chris Finch are both great coaches, this whole series came down to like 8 minutes. And in that 8 minutes, Minnesota was better defensively, and a couple of their inconsistent offensive guys hit. I mean, I don't want to be overly cynical with Denver. I'm like, hey, it's hard to win back-to-backs. It's just hard. There's no Jordan right now in the league. And even Magic Johnson got to 9 finals, won 5, lost 4. That was Kareem Magic. Worthy. This stuff is hard. I love Jamal Murray. He's never been a first team all NBA guy. So it's like you lose to good teams. And Ant's just better today than he was last year. It's part of what it is.
Yeah, here's an absolutely insane stat for you, Colin. So 2015 Cavs Warriors, 2016 Cavs Warriors, 2017 Cavs Warriors, 2018 Cavs Warriors.
Yeah.
Not only that, it just kind of felt like the Warriors and Cavs were head and shoulders above their conferences.
Yeah.
It wasn't particularly competitive, right? From 2019 on, we've had 6 consecutive seasons where we haven't even had a repeat conference champion, let alone a repeat NBA champion. Right. And a big part of that is the league is just super good now. Yes. It's like even if you happen to get through Minnesota, it's like you've got to get through Dallas, and that Dallas team really defends. Their rim protection is insane. Luka and Kyrie haven't even been playing that well, and they're still winning. And then you go out east, and obviously Boston is this incredible team. And so and Boston hasn't even been able to win repeat conference championships with all the talent that they have. So it really is just a testament to how deep the league is with talent. And I think if there's one thing to point to in terms of Minnesota, it's their defense is reliable on a night-to-night basis. You mentioned that earlier. And the important detail there is there's no variance with defense. There's variance with offense in the sense that sometimes a role player is hot. Sometimes he's not. Sometimes a ball handler misses his pull-up jumpers. Sometimes he makes them. Jokic, for instance, last year made all of his threes. This year can't make a 3 to save his life. There's variance to offense. With defense, it's if you bring the effort, you're going to impact the game. It is the most reliable thing. And that's why so many NBA teams, we look at defensive rating as the number one indicator of whether or not you can contend for a championship. Denver last year was the outlier as a team that was not a defending champion, that was not a top 10 defense that won the title. That was highly unusual. It had been 40 years since that had happened. Generally speaking, it is defense that is the most reliable trait that a basketball team can have at this phase. And for the record, Denver last year was a really good defense in the playoffs. And so, yeah, to me, it's timely contributions from role players like Cat tonight, Naz Reid tonight. Anthony Edwards coming into tonight was averaging 36-6 on over 50% from the field, over 40% from three, over 80% from the line. He's been playing at a bona fide top tier super duper star level. And then you have this all world defense. It's a really, really good basketball team. Really difficult to beat 4 times out of 7. The NBA playoffs are heating up, and so is the action at DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of the NBA. With same-game parlays, live betting, odds boosts, and so much more, don't miss out as the NBA postseason winds down. So, lots of great odds for the second round. If you still think the Nuggets are going to come back and beat the Timberwolves, you can get them right now at plus 105. Thunder Mavs starts here shortly. And if you like the Mavs to win that series, you can get them at minus 105. And if you're new to DraftKings, you got to check this out. New customers bet $5 to get 150 in bonus bets instantly. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app now and use code HOOPS. That's HOOPS. That's code HOOPS for new customers to get 150 in bonus bets when you bet just $5. Only on DraftKings. The crown is yours.
So Minnesota will face Dallas. I was at a restaurant. I wanted to watch the game. So I have this restaurant I go to with a TV. And I was called to reserve this final corner bar seat so I can watch Dallas OKC. People, that was one of the best games of the year in the NBA, the OKC Dallas game. Mm-hmm. And we'll get to Dallas in a bit, but Minnesota Dallas, as we wrap up here, Minnesota Dallas, your first thoughts on what we'll get?
So obviously it's going to be very much about the perimeter defense element in terms of Kyrie and Luka, because as we know that's very much a spread ISO pick and roll attack. We play your turn, my turn between Kyrie and Luka, and just kind of have a lot of play. Like Dallas has a lot of play finishers, whereas Denver is much more of like a 5-out motion and player movement type of offense, right? So like it's going to come down to Jaden McDaniels on Luka and a lot of Anthony Edwards on Kyrie, and how well they can hold up in those matchups and how well they can protect guys like Mike Conley and Karl-Anthony Towns, because we know Luka likes to pick on matchups. The bottom line is I think Ant right now, because of especially underneath the injury that Luka's dealing with his knee, Ant's probably going to be the best player in that series going in. Yep. And they have the size, they have the ability to really drag Dallas's offense down into the mud. I think I'll probably end up picking Minnesota. I'm going to need to look into some film, but they feel like the safe bet right now. What about you?
First of all, I think they're healthier. Second, I think they're deeper in terms of I like the construction of it. I think sometimes Dallas can be a bit lopsided. Ant, I really do think, to your point, I think Ant will be the player of the series. There are so many advantages to having Minnesota's size on the front line. You can be more aggressive on a Kyrie and a Luka. You can take more chances. Ant's aggressive anyway. And my feeling is Minnesota, the construct of I think Minnesota physically, size, aggressiveness, and Ant. I also think we have to remember Ant, this was such a great series for Ant, even though he wasn't great every game. This was the first series he was in that felt like a final. Like this felt like Jordan getting past Detroit, Jordan getting past Boston. Forget the championship. Getting through these just Western Conference heavyweight Ali Frazier fights. You move. I mean, you beat, it's like you beat a Brady or a Mahomes in the playoffs. It is as big as the Super Bowl. It's the same thing, the same arc. And I feel like this is a really memorable moment in Ant's career. We'll go back and go, God, remember the Nuggets series. Remember that fight. I kind of feel like Ant will put the cape on. He'll sleep on this. Going to be a great flight home to Minnesota. You celebrate, you get off night sleep, then you start gearing in. But I do feel like, and you see this with great players, they take steps. And I think this is the first step of Ant, like, that's the first round of his career, the first big heavyweight fight. And I think Minnesota and Ant will prevail.